on the first day, I came onto the set, and then he said, have you read this? I said, yeah. He said, haven't you read it, Marlon? No, I haven't read it. I said, Marlon, why haven't you read it? Well, it might be crap, and I need the money, so I haven't read it. I hadn't exactly retired, but things had sort of stopped for me at the end of the 60s, I'd stopped getting first division offers, and I was spoiled. I didn't want to go straight down to third division, So I just took off and I did other things. And then I was actually in India when I had this telegram arrive saying, would I come back to London and meet Dick Donner about this movie, and that Brando was going to be in. And that was just irresistible, to be in a film with Marlon. It was...
Why?
Well, because two actors of my generation, there were Brando and there was Dean, They were the two idols, and Dean was no longer with us, but Brando was still around. So the idea of, getting up on film with him, albeit brief, was just irresistible.
Was it a letdown working with him, or did it reach expectations? Well,
it wasn't a letdown. He was very different to anything that I'd imagined. He's hysterically funny for one thing, and he really doesn't learn the lines. He has them kind of written. He has them written up big behind the lights. So you can't really see he's reading. And in the scene that I did with him, he was, I was, you're waiting to do the scene, and I saw him, he had a little bit of paper, and he was, you're a really disgusting example of Krypton, and what he was trying to do, he was trying to learn the first line, so that as he turned towards me, he could be speaking before he had it written down. Do you see what I mean? He was just trying to learn this one line, so it looked natural. And I just couldn't believe it, so I went up to him. I said, Marlon, what are you doing? So I'm trying to learn this line, before. And I said, but how are you going to play Lear and Macbeth, if you can't learn a line, And he said, I've learnt them already. Just not a moment's pause.
And so then you're both on set. And what was that like, being on set with Marlon Brando and Gene Hackman and Ned Beatty, all of these wonderful
Can I just
cast?
say, before we talk about Marlon Brando, do you know what it's like being on set with Terence Stamp? What a joy and a delight. Every morning, it was an absolute pleasure. And I have to just quickly say, because people say they know I'm a fidget, they know I'm mess around and I'm all over the place. The stillness of Ursa and the supervillains is all down to Terence, because you were so wonderfully still and so calming. And I remember you once said to me, we need to walk. We need to be different because we're aliens. We need to be different. And I used to think I was fascinated because you drank mint tea and you did hum noises and stuff. And I'd never known anything like it. So I want to thank you for Ursa, because I honestly would never have got there without you.
Listen, I'm looking for a lover that won't blow my cover,
But didn't you do a similar thing with Jack O'Halloran, who played Non, who's the real big kind of third of the triumvirate of baddies?
The thing about Jack is that he's a genuinely ferocious guy, He was a heavyweight boxer. There were these rumors about him getting up to all kinds of stuff with the mafia, And but on the set, he was what I call a heavy rapper. And he would intimidate people into kind of listening to him, and he would tell these amazing stories, you know. So I went along with him for like a couple of days, and but he was really keen to be like a straight actor, you know. He saw this as a big start for him, and so after I'd really kind of sussed him out the first couple of days, I said to him, now listen, I'm the general, okay? And just between you and I only want you to think that. That's all I want from you. I just want this one thing, is that whenever you see me, remember, I'm the general, and I'm a real wicked bastard, you know, so. He said, yeah, and I said, that's the way we'll do it. We'll practice. It's like method acting. We'll practice it off the set, but when we get on the set, it will come over, you know. We're doing this together. He said, right. So then that afternoon, I was called to the set, and it was in a big sound stage that was kind of empty, but the set was quite small, and it was, I think it was the interior of the White House, and we just kind of come in through the roof, you know. And so they call me, I arrive, and everybody's there, and nobody's doing anything. And I say, what's the problem, you know? And they say, well, and I hear right on the other side of the set, Jack rapping to somebody. And it's obviously, it's a long story, you know. So I said, Jack! You bastard! I'm ready and I'm waiting! And all the crew went like, shit. And the talking stopped immediately, and there was this kind of silence. And then there were these huge footfalls all the way across the stage, you know. And he came very close. Sorry, General.
You know, with Dick Donner, you find things. You know, there's a family to it. Richard Lester came in. There was nothing close to a family atmosphere. There was nothing close to finding out what works and what doesn't work. You'd come in, he told you to stand on that mark over there and say blue, and then go walk over there and say red.
Nobody disliked Richard Lester. I mean, Richard Lester's like a wonderful director, but the point was that Richard Lester came in to do a very complicated gig. He knew we were all in love with Richard Donner. The Sorkins had chosen him because they knew that he was an economic director who could bring things in on budget. So I would imagine he had a shot list of essentials of what the producers needed to finish this bloody movie. And we were shooting the two things together. And I think the budget for the two, I think, was 8 big ones. You know, it was like 8 mil. And after about 25 weeks, he'd spent like 20 million, you know. And the producers, and this is the story I heard. This may not be gospel, but this is what I heard. I heard the Sorkins, they went to him and they said, okay, stop working on part 2. Just finish part 1. So he said, fine. So we finished part 1. It opened, and it was the biggest film, the biggest box office ever known, you know. And they the producers immediately fired him and replaced him with Richard Lester. But it was a terrible thing. Obviously, it was terrible for him, but it was terrible for us because we kind of loved him. And there was no way we could not go back. Am I right in that?
Absolutely. That's exactly the story that I heard. And I don't even know that I really knew where Dick had gone. You know, we just seemed to turn up again months later, and we started shooting, and suddenly Richard Lester. And I cannot tell you how different the two directors were. Now, I have to say, as a young actress, it's the most wonderful, for me, it was a marvelous experience to reshoot, as we did, a lot of the scenes with somebody that was so different, was, for experience-wise, was amazing. But we went from having this wonderful, larger-than-life, loving, gregarious man to Dick Lester, who was much quieter and didn't have the same sort of humor, did he? And everybody was pissed off. I mean, the cast were, I mean, particularly Chris and Margot, I know, were deeply, deeply upset and felt very betrayed. And it was difficult, wasn't it?
Yeah, the magic, this is something I feel I should explain, but you'll all really understand it. And that one of the magic moments of making movies is that from time to time you get a crew that becomes a troupe, and you really feel like you're in one of Shakespeare's companies with Shakespeare writing and touring around England doing stuff. In other words, 2 and 2 make 7, you know, and that happens rarely. But when it happens, it's so wonderful because you can't wait to get to work, you know. And that was really down to Richard Donner, because he had my feeling. I mean, I'm a romantic, but I just felt he had this kind of aura that just enclosed all of us, you know. And the fact is, when he was let go, I mean, none of us, we just didn't want to go back, you know what I mean? It wasn't the fact that we didn't think Richard Lester was a great director. It was just, it was like Richard Donner's project. And the reason that, you know, we're here and this is being shown is I just feel nobody in England has ever seen it, you know, and I would really, and as it's the only really successful film I've ever been in, and
That's not
I
true.
can rarely get through the day without somebody coming up to me and saying, "Kneel before Zod, you git," you know. So I'm very, very, very happy to. We're very happy to share it with you.
Hello, it's time.
I've got a story about Terence Stamp. I think it was season 3. It must have been season 3 or 4 because we had the Fortress of Solitude. But we were on set, and one of the ADs came over and said, "Oh, your father's here." I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" "Oh, the guy who plays your father, Terence Stamp, and I know who he is as an actor." He says, "Yeah, he wants to meet you." I was like, "Yeah, of course. The guy's a legend." So I go over there, and he's with his wife, and he's like, you know, just, hello, nice to meet you. I was in town shooting something else, and I wanted to just, you know, come by and meet, you know, my son. And it's like, "Oh, that's so endearing." He goes, Where's that fortress set?" And I was like, "Oh, it's right next door," because it's right next to Luther Mansion where we were shooting. And we walk over, and he kind of just looks at it, and he goes, "Wow, thank you." And no goodbye, just walked off.
Thank you.
And that was it. And I was like, all right, that's how they do it.
I bought a round the world ticket, first class. I thought that was kind of classy. And I went to Egypt was the first stop. And then the second stop was Bombay. And I didn't not work. Occasionally I'd do something, some independent. I'd get a couple of weeks' work. I'd get the money for the year. I'd go back to India. So that's how it happened. All the time that was happening, weeks became months, months became years, years passed. The desert went on for so long that I'd kind of, like a lot of things in life, where you give up, where you let go, then something happens. And that was the telegram, the famous telegram, to come back and see Richard Donner about Superman 1 and 2. And I was reassured by the fact that as I appeared as the supervillain, and they did everything they could to make me look hideous, you know, they lit me from below, they put green makeup on me, they gave me these ridiculous costumes, you know. the camera was still my girl, you know what I mean? Like the camera could always find the best of Terence, and all Terence had to do was give the best of himself, you know, to his ceiling at the time.
General Zod's a big character.
Yeah.
It also got you to be close to a hero, right, in Brando.
Yes.
So to be around Brando, was it what you thought it would be?
Yes, I mean, he was more than I expected because he was funny. He was really funny. He was naturally funny. He didn't tell jokes. He had a funny view on life, you know? He came over to me and he said, see those two girls over there? I said, yeah. I said, they want your I said, well, what about your Mom? Well, they know my
Well, what happened?
TV, right? I did it because I thought to myself, every kid in the world is going to see this. And by the time the film comes out, more than half of the kids are going to identify with General Zod than Superman, you know. And that's proved to be the case, you know. I never go by you know, grown-ups now, you know, and they look at me and they say, hey, you're that General Zod, you know. I say, smile when you say that, fella. How did I prepare for General Zod? Well, strangely enough, I didn't actually have to prepare for General Zod because it came at a time when I hadn't worked. I hadn't done any serious films since kind of 1977. I'd made little parts, I'd done The Rent, I'd done independent movies, and I was living in India. I was actually in an ashram. And in this ashram, the point of this ashram was that we were encouraged to stay aware as much as possible. And there was this whole interaction between all the kind of sannyasins who lived in the ashram. Like, if we noticed that somebody was like just, you know, not present, we would kind of nudge them, you know, or we would take the piss out of them, or we would bring it to their attention. And that was the kind of ambiance I'd been living in for like a year when the General Zod part came up. And, you know, consequently, I hadn't cut my hair for 7 years. I had a long beard, you know. When I went to meet Richard Donner, I was still in Orange. I still had the long hair. And I was to be honest with you, I was surprised I got the part. I couldn't imagine why Richard Donner had cast me, you know. But on that day, when I went on the set to meet them, including Marlon, which was a huge moment for me, I had a feeling that like I was just more awake than everybody else. I mean, obviously they were awake and they were working and they were talking, but in comparison with how focused I was, everybody seemed like half asleep. So I didn't need any preparation. I thought, I'll just go with that. I'll play this role as though I'm in the ashram. I won't worry about being evil or what I say or what I do. I'll just bring this kind of all-enveloping presence to it. And yeah, that's what I did.